Thanks for listening to That Great Mank Pod. Please do us a massive favour and subscribe to this podcast. And if you can, leave us a review on iTunes. Both are a massive help, enabling us to promote the people and the great causes we champion to a much bigger audience. If you want to get in touch, give us a follow on Twitter at Great Mank Pod and drop us a DM. Cheers.
You're listening to That Great Mank Pod, Greater Manchester's community podcast. Top one, our kid.
Michael, if you can tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, hello, I'm Michael Taylor. I'm a journalist based in Stockport, and I broadcast on the radio. I write for various outlets, and I do a bit of political advice.
Political advice, and who do you advise politically?
So I'm the political assistant to the Labour group on Stockport Council. That's actually a paid job for which I am bound by the Local Government Act, so I'm politically restricted.
Right.
We do comms. I can't be a spokesman for the party or the leader or the group, but I can help them, and I do advise them on their messaging and political strategy. We're an opposition group, so it's not as good as being in charge of the council.
Well, yeah,
but it continues to scratch an itch I have.
I mean, we know you because you supported a charity, which was amazing. We raised, I think, from the single that you did, not you did personally, but you were involved in, raised. It was about £13,000, I think it was, which
brilliant.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And that's all gone to good use. None of it left.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. We're living in times where that has been put to good use across various projects. But yeah, it was a fantastic initiative.
Sure. Well, my involvement in that, basically, I've been a journalist all my life. I started out when I was in my early 20s writing about music, culture, fashion, films, that sort of thing. But that was in Australia, in Perth, in WA. Then I came back to Britain and I found a career in writing about business. It wasn't necessarily at the time what I thought I'd end up doing all my life, but I have done. And I've enjoyed being a business journalist because it actually gives you access to people in positions of power and influence in ways that I didn't imagine. Now, I used to write about IT and big business. Then I wrote for most of the 90s. I wrote about the television industry, the television business.
Right.
The franchise rounds of the 90s, Sky TV emerging as a force, the bidding for football rights, TV technology, how that all changed from tape editing to non-linear editing on desktop. I like periods of change and flux and dynamism. So that was all very exciting. And then the catalyst for me bumping into you guys eventually was in the year 2000, when my eldest son was only 1. I moved back to the Northwest, to Manchester, to be the editor of Insider Media, as it's now called. And so for 13 years, I was the group editorial director at Insider. We had a magazine, Northwest Business Insider, in Manchester, magazines in Yorkshire, the Midlands, and then we rolled out and launched in South Wales and the southwest of England, in Bristol as well. And did loads of events around the country. And that's where I bumped into, the likes of Stephen Lindsay, Mike Reeves, Jeremy Smith, who, we were like the organising committee for a musical charitable event that we called the Y Factor.
Yeah.
Which was, again, like the social arm of that part of the business community. And we had some great times. We organised some great events. And then I left it Insider in 2012, did a few different things, wrote a couple of books, and then went to work at Manchester Met University for 5.5 years.
Right.
When I left, I was the head of regional affairs, sort of looking after the university's relationships with the region, which I guess in all that time of being an editor and a man about town, I'd got to know a lot of people. So I wanted to leverage those relationships for the benefit of an institution that does good in Greater Manchester, which is Manchester Met University. And they were good enough to pay for me to do a master's degree in that time as well. And I did that. It's called Devolution and Democracy. And I did it I used as a case study. Andy Burnham's first term. I've read it.
Oh, Andy, but no, I'd actually say we are an Andy Burnham free podcast.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Why is that?
Because
everyone else is.
No, not really. I'm not. Listen, we've had a couple of meetings with him. Has he done much for us? No. All we've ever asked him to do is open doors for us. Has he opened doors for us? No. Has he opened doors for other people? Who probably offer him a bit more than what we do? Yeah. So is he the king of the north? No. I'm not 12. That's a load of bollocks. Listen, it does a job. Listen, I'm of that age, probably the same as you, that you can either whinge about stuff or crack on and get and do what you can do, and that's what we do. So he doesn't enter into our lives, and when we've asked for support, we've had a little bit, but not as much as I would have hoped for, considering what we've done. So yeah, we passed to one side, yeah, and then all this King of the North bollocks just got to the point where it was like, this is madness. It's his job. He's doing his job. So no.
Well, if a publisher ever wants me to write this book proposal up that I've proposed, King of the North.
Oh, you haven't, have you?
Yeah.
Do you buy into that? Do you really buy into that?
No, Paul. It's a name, isn't it? It's a name, like it or not, and you don't. That has been attributed to him, and therefore, I think he's an interesting politician that requires further scrutiny and further examination and a story to be told. Not necessarily the way he'd necessarily want to tell it. I'm a journalist. I'm in pursuit of the truth. I'm obviously deeply embedded in politics for the time being, but yeah, I've been a supporter of the Devolution Project. I was involved in something called the Necessary Group back in 2004, which was actually pursuing devolution for the Northwest. Right. We even commissioned Peter Saville to design as a flag.
Right. Have you got? I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I've still got it. Yeah, I will. I'll
share that later.
Yeah, I've still got it somewhere. I put it on Twitter this week actually, because one of my fellow political anoraks, a lovely, lovely guy called David Hyam, used to be a very senior civil servant. He's retired now, and he just cycles around canals and around the Northwest.
Has adventures.
Yeah, he's such a smashing fella. Me and him are real sort of historians of sort of political governance outside of London. And there was a report that Harold Wilson commissioned called the Redcliffe Maud Commission to look at a reorganisation of local government. And it proposed this really strange area that's sort of like Greater Manchester. It's called something like Selneck. That's it, Selneck. Sorry. Southeast Lancashire, Northeast Cheshire.
Wow.
You can't have a flag for that, could you? Sounds like someone you pay your power bills to, doesn't it?
Oh, I'm sure there's been lots of weird and wonderful ideas as to how we can carve this up.
But my perspective on it, really. Sorry, Damien. Just to finish on this, my starting point when I was the editor of Insider in the Northwest in the early 2000s, was that Britain as a country is ridiculously centralised, and there have been innumerable reports that have been written since, and my thesis, drew on a lot of them in its literature review, that basically say that, that a more federal structure to the country that, would include devolution for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales as they're on that journey, but actually more autonomy for places like the Northwest. Now, how those structures and the details of it work out, is something that we're wrestling with now. But you can't have an economy where effectively we've got London and the Southeast, and the rest of us have got living, by any other economic measure, there's parts of the rest of England outside of Manchester, it's below the average in a modern industrial country. And that's not,
yeah.
It's not sustainable. And it's not about getting the begging bowl out. It's the opposite. It's actually about, this is the solution to the nation's problems, to actually unlock the potential of our children and our grandchildren, and the God-given assets of the regions to actually fulfill their potential. That we're not just an island that sort of does financial services and arts and media in London, and the rest of us can have a few crumbs off the table if they would be so kind. Thank you. I just think we can be a bit more ambitious than that. And that's where I sort of drifted into politics from a business and economic starting point.
Have you never thought of running?
No, I did. I stood for the Labour Party in the general election in 2015 in, to be fair, the unwinnable seat of Hazel Grove, which switched from being Liberal Democrat to Conservative. But, I did all right. I enjoyed the campaign. And then in 2019, I stood in the very last European Parliament elections as well. But that was just a bit of a charade, a bit of nonsense.
Sorry, Damien, what were you going to say before, mate?
No, I was just, I'm actually glad that you've brought up the subject of politics, because I mean, as a charity and the charity sector and everything, we're told all the time that we're not to get involved in politics, we're not to have an agenda, we're not to have all this sort of stuff.
All right, scrub that lot then.
No, but
it's better than that.
Everything that you try and deal with within the third sector is of political making, So
yeah, of course it is.
All the ills of society and all the things, it is down to policy at the end of the day. So, there is an element of campaigning. That's politics is my hobby. I've been very active over the years in various ways. I was a national trade unionist in the civil service for 8 years. So I had the real opportunity of a kid from Clayton sat in, negotiations with ministers down in London, so I was involved in the negotiations for the development of soccer and things like that,
Excellent.
And I remember then looking out of the window over the Thames and thinking, not many lads from Clayton get to sort of come in this. Yeah. But it's that transferable skills. And I'm always saying to people about being active, and getting active. But it just fascinates me. And one of the things we're always doing with the charity, me and Paul, probably at least 2 or 3 times a week, are discussing the future, or what things are going to come up. Like the cost of living at the moment, it hasn't hit yet. The actual the struggle and the suffering and that a lot of people are going to go through. We've seen the start of it, and I mean, we've all had conversations about how we cut back, how we change things.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be the third sector again that has to pick up the pieces, and the more and more we're under, the funding's getting less. And I will say it, coming out of Europe meant there was a lot of European social funding and stuff that just isn't there anymore. But also fundraising, mate. And that's why we were so appreciative of the business community in Manchester rallying behind us and other charities, because people don't give you credit. They don't give the guys from them institutes, especially financial institutions. They see them all as nasty, horrible people that are just rinsing the earth. You know what I mean? But they're doing amazing stuff, and they have got heart. Do you know what I mean?
They are human.
Yeah, but how do we build those links better? How do we, I've worked in private sector, and I support lots of other organisations as a consultant, charities, community groups, all sorts of stuff. And I'm always telling them to think more business, to build up those relationships and build up them links. But it seems a massive silo mentality, especially with third sector organisations, that, no, we can't do that. That's a sellout. That's the thing, And that stops us doing so much more good work. Do you know what I mean?
It's crazy because you flip it and you talk to businesses, and there's a certain number of businesses will want to greenwash their less than wholesome activities to make themselves sleep at night. But for the most part, they just want to do good. They want to think that their life has meaning and purpose beyond just turning over a few quid. and they want to be able to contribute and put something back. I think it's, your charity called Manx Spirit. I think there is a spirit, particularly in Manchester, but also across other places in the north, that we're part of a community that one falls, we all fall. And they have a deep responsibility to play their part in that, to help those who can't always help themselves. And businesses are really sincere about that, really sincere, and pursue an agenda. A lot of it gets called ESG, environmental, societal, and governance, which means, we run things properly, and we want to make sure that the impact that we're having on our environment, both socially and the physical environment, is positive. And I think there's an open door, and that anybody in the third sector needs to just, be alive to the opportunity.
100%.
There are things to collaborate on.
No, listen, I'm a massive believer that, most people are decent, given the opportunity.
Yeah.
And, we find that all the time. And collaborations, it's amazing how many people really don't understand the word collaboration. Collaboration is not me coming in, taking everything that you've got for my benefit. It is mutual benefit. And my background is business. I've set up businesses for 30 odd years. So the charitable sector was relatively new to me, and I've worked with some horrible people in the business world. But I tell you what, there are some real characters in the charity world, and this kind of these are our people that we're looking after. We don't, and it's unbelievable. It is really unbelievable, to the point where, listen, there's me and Damien, we have volunteers, depending on what projects we're doing. But, we came to this point a long time ago where we come and we say, listen, we've got this idea, we've got this initiative, we want you to get involved. And if it's like, well, we don't really, right, bye, and we'll go. So we have a 2-meeting rule, which we pretty much stick to, certainly with regards to councils and everything else. If it goes over 2 meetings, it ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
Unless there's a shed load of money involved, in which case we'll do 3 or 4 meetings. We're not daft, but that's very, very rare. So we move on, which is, what kind of brings us to these festivals that we've been running.
Yeah.
As Manx Spirit, we're one of the 35 organisations supported by GM Culture, along with Manchester International Festival, all the big theatres, all the big plays. Then you've got me and Damien. So you can imagine we've shook it up a little bit, as I think was the one when we were brought in, as well as putting a good bid in. So we've been running these festivals. We started the first one in Trafford, slap bang as the lockdown started in March 2020, which totally changed the way that we did it. We took it online. And if you search through the hashtags, our Trafford, our Stockport, our Wigan, our Berwick, you will see the people and the things that we've kind of got involved with and what we've pushed and promoted.
Excellent.
But our recent one was Tameside. And we picked Tameside, and, we purposely, with the 10 boroughs, Manchester was always going to be last. Because, Manchester does all right. Thank you very much. A lot of the boroughs all put into the pot, but they don't get it back.
Yeah.
Tameside being one of those areas. And I don't profess, and I still don't, profess to really, I don't understand. Tameside is like, so I live in Trafford now, originally from North Manchester, but Tameside is it's a really weird place in terms of the setup and how it works. The same as Trafford. There's no kind of central.
Yeah, you don't say you come from Trafford, do you?
No.
And you might say you come from a bit of Tameside, but I broadcast on Tameside Radio and do a show every Sunday night called Music Therapy, sort of combining new music, old music, and a lot of chat about mental health. And so many times people go, "Where's that?"
Yeah.
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 And it's my friends in America who listen to the show, they laugh because they've got these stings where they beam out on the show where they just go, Duckenfield, Stalybridge, Hyde, in that booming radio voice. But you have to, because they are the communities that people relate to as to where they're from.
Yeah.
Because that's where people will say they're from. And Tameside kind of consolidates all of that because it's basically a line on a map.
Yeah.
And, and other boundaries for like health areas or or for parliamentary constituencies or for policing or whatever else. They sort of crisscross a little bit. Yeah. Cheshire, some bits of Tameside were in Cheshire with the old boundaries. Ashton-under-Lyne was in Lancashire.
Yeah.
You know, and it's all to do with rivers and stuff like that. Stockport's the same. North of it's called Lancashire Hill in Stockport for a reason, because from the River Mersey towards the Heatons and Reddish, that's Lancashire. The other side, it's Cheshire. Don't feel like it, you know.
I mean, that's one of the things that we're trying through the festivals is to encourage grassroots community groups to actually take control of the local narrative. Yeah. You know, it's you said earlier about, Manchester and GMCA and all that sort of stuff. I grew up in central Manchester. You know, I'm from North Manchester as well, and I have no affiliation with the city centre anymore. It's grey, boring, and all the sort of communities that made up Manchester have been pushed out or diluted. You know, so what we're always saying is, and I suppose there's a sort of political activist sort of element to that. We say to community groups, don't let the councils set up their One Manchester or these silly branded things and renaming that they come up with. Take control of that narrative yourself and use that for your own economic regeneration, to create your own money based on your own folklore and stories and culture. Because what we know is what works in Wigan doesn't work in Bolton. What works in Bolton doesn't work in Oldham. One size does not fit all when they come up with these generic projects that just are irrelevant or, what's the word, Paul? They're just not relevant. They're not relevant to that local community and the makeup of that community. So everything we try and do is about encouraging these other community groups and fantastic creatives to actually explore their own narrative and then work on that. Don't fit into this grey mold nonsense. You know what I mean? Because that's what makes us different. And there's a massive pride still there within communities, of your history, your folklore, whether that's regional folklore or from people that have come from other countries and and brought benefit with them. You've got to explore that rich tapestry of culture as well.
I've in terms of communities, I've never been a bricks and mortar person. Buildings, whatever you see a building, yeah, that's nice, whatever. And Manchester's changed so much, especially since '96. And you get all these various things that come out and say Manchester's been voted the best city in the world, and you think, no, you don't travel, do you? Because if you do travel, there's plenty of cities far nicer than Manchester. But community-wise, I think we've got the best communities.
Yeah.
Certainly I've ever come across such diverse communities, and it's still there. And, as much as you can get a little bit cynical and think, is it really? Do people really care about each other anymore? And yet, we're always out there in the communities and meeting even people relatively close to where we live who are doing phenomenal things for other human beings. And it does, even when we're having a really shitty day, and we have them, and you just, we end up talking to someone who's doing just fantastic stuff for other people, and usually at their expense. Not making a living out of it by any stretch of the imagination, just doing it because they want to make a difference. And that is a big part of not initially what we envisaged for Manx Spirit, I'll be honest, but we're relatively small and we can move depending on change, which is a good thing considering the last couple of years. But a big thing for us now is finding out where those people are and what they're doing. And again, with age comes connections. I know an awful lot of people. So does Damien, and we know people who know people. So we can open doors for people, and we can help them with funding. We can, help them. Everyone's screaming out for volunteers at the moment. So many charities are really struggling. COVID. A lot of the older people who are helping out, no nefarious reason, they've just stayed at home and not gone back. So they're really, really struggling on that point. So allowing us to focus on particular areas like Tameside we did a podcast with the Anthony Seddon Fund, who do fantastic stuff, and I'd always known about them, but never really spoken to them. And we're going in to see them next week, and they're crying out for volunteers. So it allowed us, it's a platform for them to come on and tell other people what they need now, as opposed to if someone listens to this in 6 months, it's out of date. I'm not bothered about that for this podcast. It's about what can we do now. So in terms of Tameside and the radio show that you do that I know of, and
one of the best things that Tameside's got, I think, over and above any other part of Greater Manchester, is its media. So, I read the Stockport Express every week. It doesn't take long to read anymore. It's part of the MEN media group. Lots of crime, a little bit of court reporting, the council reporter, local democracy reporters, they're called. They do a good job. But I tell you what, the Glossop Chronicle and the Tameside Reporter are newspapers in a completely different league. They feel and they read like a newspaper from 30 years ago, but it's full of colour pictures, really good colour pictures of people taking part in events, school fetes, openings, festivals, business openings. It's just got that vibrancy about it. And people will pick the paper up and go, hey, have you seen this? Hey, Damien, you're in paper. You're on page 24. Again.
What's he done now?
And yeah, sure, it's got the stuff that you expect to see in it, court watch. So you scan down the ages and you go, oh, right, I was at school with him.
Yeah, he's always a wrong one.
Yeah. And in alliance with that, so Quest Media, who I do some work for, they've got two fantastic community newspapers covering, all the towns of Tameside, and also the Glossop Chronicle, which covers going into the High Peak as well. And
is that Chris?
Chris Bird, yeah.
Yeah, Chris Bird, yeah.
And then with it as well is an FM radio license for Tameside Radio. And Andy Hoyle runs it, who's a real veteran of commercial radio in the Northwest and Granada TV. And it's a proper radio station. And we've been given permission to do something a little bit different on Sunday night. But so too have lots of other broadcasters. They do sport, they do chat, talk, different types of music. A really interesting breakfast show with Alex Cann, the hardest working DJ in local radio. And it feels really in touch with its community. And by God, a community like the ones in Ashton, Hyde, Duckingfield, Audenshaw. I should read them out in the Smash and Nicey voice, shouldn't I? They need it. They need that sort of coherence that a media organisation can give them, and they do such a good job of it. And then the springboard from that is that we've had the opportunity to do a few other things as well. And I write a column in the paper where I can write about what I want. Really, I could write about you guys.
I wouldn't. That sounded vaguely threatening, that, wouldn't it? I wouldn't if I was you. No, listen, it's nice to see. I think one of the biggest, when I look at I remember the evening news and I look at it now, it's just depressing. It really is depressing. Yeah. It is, what's your favorite restaurant? What's your and you just think, what? Is this where we are? Because there's still some really, really serious stuff happening out there. But who's covering it? I mean, we've got the Mill that's just been open a little while. They were doing really good journalism, that thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big defender of journalists, so fine. You say the Mill, I'll raise you Jonathan Schofield at Manchester Confidential.
Yeah.
Jonathan, I just think, is fantastic. Paul Unger's Place Northwest. There's where I used to work. There's Business Desk, which is good updates on news. David Tame, who writes a fantastic column for called Subplot for Place Northwest. Right. That's brilliant. Some of the journalists who write for national newspapers based in the North, like Jennifer Williams, who used to be at the MEN. Yeah. She's now at the FT. Helen Pidd at the Guardian. I mean, Helen's got a massive patch. From Romilly, she covers the North. and she likes stories about cycling. She wants to put a hat on the tower in Stockport. But, these are good journalists doing their best with depleted resources.
Oh, yeah, listen, I get that. And, they're not, I'm not saying for a second there aren't massively talented people out there who are doing good stuff. And it's not, they're not making the decisions in terms of where, we're going to go for clickbait.
No, they're not. That's a fair point.
And it's never been easier to get your message out there. If you want to, you've set up the podcast with Chris.
Yeah.
You want to get your message out there. Easiest thing in the world. I tell people that all the time in terms of man-made and everything else. I get constantly people whinging, saying how difficult it is to do anything. And that's it. No, it isn't. Listen, if a 52-year-old bloke can write a film script and get Lee Child on as exec producer, film it on location in Manchester, then, why can't you? Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of just go out there and get. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen.
Strangely enough, I was at a breakfast this morning in Manchester with John Robb.
Yeah,
he set up the Louder Than War. What a website! He used to be a journalist for Sounds. He's got his own band. I knew John when I was about 15 when I set up a fanzine in my hometown of Lancaster, home city.
What was the fanzine?
It's called Positive Feedback. I only did 2 editions, but I picked up John's fanzine. I can't even remember what it was called, and I don't think he could either. At the event this morning,
such were the times.
Yeah, but he was based in Blackpool. But I used to go to gigs around the north. Friends of mine who'd gone to college in Leeds or Liverpool or Manchester, I'd always pick up fanzines outside that people would be selling, and I wanted to do my own. One of the others that I picked up was a fanzine called Attack on Bazag, and it was this wiry little curly-haired kid from Leeds called James Brown, who went on to be the founder of Loaded. And he wrote for the NME and Sunday Times Magazine and GQ. He's just got a book coming out about the whole experience of doing Loaded. And John did one as well. And he actually rang me at home, and I still remember the conversation. And I'm not the person I am now, or I'll talk to anyone. I was like painfully shy. But, this guy who's in a band, who's got his name in his own fanzine, has rung me up. And he was talking actually today about the logic of that is like this informal network of fanzine people and people in bands in small towns with no scene, like Blackpool, like Lancaster, like Kendal. We were the ones who could enable him to go and do a gig at Morecambe Pier, which he did. And that was that DIY ethos. So I did a careers day at Manchester University about 7 years ago. And actually, the head of careers then called me in for a chat and went, "We've had a complaint."
Yeah.
And I'll tell you how the conversation went. So it was a load of poshos at the University of Manchester, sat around saying, "Yeah, I want to be a filmmaker," or "I want to work for the BBC." And it's probably the editor of Newsnight now. And I said, "So come on, all of you, just go around the table. Tell me what's on your YouTube channel." Yeah, I knew what the answer was going to be. None of them had their own YouTube channel. I went, "My 10-year-old son's got his own YouTube channel where he makes SpongeBob SquarePants videos. So if he can do it, why can't you? And if you can't demonstrate that you're using the free tools available to you to make content, then why should anybody out there commission you? Go and make a film. It's never been easier." And I tell the story about, me creating a photocopied fanzine and flogging it outside clubs and gigs when I was a teenager. That's what got me the bug to try and tell my truth and tell my stories and get my name out there and just talk absolute nonsense to my dwindling band of friends and family.
Oh, dear, it's sounding like a cry for help, this now.
No, it wasn't. And if you don't hustle, you don't get. So my kids, my youngest kid is a music producer. And he's working with Kid Creole's daughter at the moment. Yeah, because they just put themselves out there. They've got the tools and the technology. Another of his mates has just got a record deal, whatever that means nowadays. Now we don't actually buy records, but he's got management who are finding him gigs. Another of my sons works in the hospitality sector and he wants to get into live music and live entertainment. He's got a degree in music business. And I keep saying to him, it's all about the hustle. Yeah, I came to that conclusion quite early in my life, and I've you can't stop hustling. Yeah, it's what gets you favors. Sometimes doors don't open for you, but you've never got to stop.
You knock it
And
down.
look for those win-wins. It might take more than 2 meetings sometimes, Paul, but
Well,
it's always about identifying those win-wins. So the next time you come knocking on the door in Tameside, let's get around the table with Emma Marsh from Quest Media, who's brilliant, and think, right, what can we do in partnership with Quest, and what resources you've got together, and see what we can do. See, we're having a business meeting and live on a podcast now.
100%, and this is the first one as well, and that sounds all right. Listen, I know Chris. Met him a couple of times.
That's what these festivals were all about, Michael.
Yeah.
It was
finding local partners.
It isn't the thing. We've always, every borough that we've been to, we've met some fantastic groups, and we now collaborate. And because it's about legacy.
Yeah,
it's not a quick hit doing, and the hashtags are there to develop and all the other stuff that we do with it. But I mean, we have we would love to actually talk to them, because one of the things that me and Paul have talked about is setting up our own community newspaper.
Very good. Yeah, you should.
Because it's too much of a given for especially the older generation that everything's online.
Actually, before I forget, because this tends to happen at my age, we had Mark Turton on from CIC, who were at PAC CIC, sorry, who were based in your part of the world, and Tameside Radio came up. They would love an introduction to Tameside Radio and maybe get the kids involved in producing something in collaboration with
a youth creative group in Hattersley.
Oh, amazing!
They do short films and lots of different stuff.
Yeah, they do amazing stuff. Yeah. And they're struggling at the moment.
John Rob was talking today about something called NQ.
NQ.
Do you know anything about that?
No.
Like NQ for Northern Quarter. Base that some kids have created, where people can come along and collaborate, music, video, creatives, projects. We just wanted,
because Dana's got a couple of lads as well, and just kind of show them, because your kids don't take you seriously no matter what you do.
No.
But you want to show them that you can, if Dad can do it, then maybe there's a chance that I can do it. And, you'll get plenty of knockbacks, right? Deal with it, move on. The only thing that kind of crushes me a little bit on that is when we're talking about the hustle, and I agree, it's about being out there and it's trying to get things happen. And then I look at the LinkedIn generation and all that nonsense, and all the kids who kind of buy into that. And there's some good people on LinkedIn. I get it, but I don't want thinking that's life.
Yeah,
that is how it should be done, and it's
the self-promoted gurus.
It just sucks the creativity out of everything. Yeah. That place, but again, we're not going to get sponsored by them, so I can say that.
I actually find LinkedIn an incredibly rich place for getting clicks and likes on your content, and the more positive, the better. So the old cynic in me, you can see right through some of the nonsense that people claim, but actually for engagement, it's phenomenal. The number of people who engage and like and comment, it's not always the most challenging and content, but a video or an article I might write, if it's vaguely business related, I stick it on LinkedIn and it gets good traction.
Yeah I know people who are LinkedIn superstars. Love it, absolutely love it. But then again, they get up half an hour before they went to bed. It's that kind of generation. Just listen, mate. That's just a little whinge there from Paul.
Yeah, no worries.
So, I'm interested about, podcasts is a big part of what, obviously with this, we've got the Great Mount Pod, which if I was making this as a commercial entity, I won't be making the episodes at an hour plus, because that's kiss of death. But, we took the decision at the beginning that the people that we're speaking to have got some really good stuff to say. And if people haven't got that, aren't going to listen to it and aren't interested, so what? Whatever.
Yeah.
But, we're charting. We're getting in we're in Apple Podcasts. which is amazing for a community-based podcast.
Yeah.
Because people are listening, taking time to listen to these conversations of a moment in time. You know, if you want to find out what age UK, what kind of situation they're dealing with at the moment, well, listen to the podcast from a few weeks ago, and that'll tell you the struggles that they're having. If you want to speak to someone who's dealing with kids out in the streets now, then listen to PAC CIC. Will it be relevant in 12 months? No, probably not. But the whole podcast situation, I'm a massive believer in podcasts from a commercial point of view, whether it be the audio drama stuff that I do from my productions or through this particular one. So I'm always interested as to why people set one up on what they're looking to get out of it. So can you tell me a little bit about the podcast that you've set up with Chris?
Yeah, so Chris came to me with the idea, and
right.
we'd never really worked together on anything. We had a little overlap when he took over part of my job at Insider in 2012, but we never really stayed in touch or anything. I wanted to get out of his way, get out from under his feet, and moved on. And I wanted that kind of phase of my life to be over and a clean break. But he got in touch with me out of the blue, and he said, I've been listening to the Alistair Campbell, Rory Stewart podcast, two very different people, you know, a Tory and a very Labour guy, talking about politics. He goes, well, it strikes me that it's still very Westminster. How would you like to work with me on something? And I was a bit sceptical, to be honest with you. I wasn't so sure what we'd both bring. I thought that we were maybe too different. But actually, we're on episode 8 now, and we're doing a little spin-off interview series as well.
Right.
And it's gone really well, and I've really enjoyed it. I've got a massive amount of respect for his energy and his ideas and his thick skin, because he lets me take the piss out of him.
He's a nice bloke. I met him a few times back in the day. He's a nice bloke, yeah.
And like I say, he's got a very different style to me in how he presents events and how he approaches podcast production. And our cultural hinterlands are very different. Politically, we're, probably not that far apart, actually. We're both very common sense. But the same thing, though. I'm really, really self-conscious of the fact we're still basically two white fellas in our 50s.
There's a lot of us. There's a lot of us.
So when now we are in the, we started doing these interviews. I think we need to start being much more diverse in the people that we get on as guests. So I've been reaching out, and if I can, through the good organ of this podcast, make a plea. If you want to get in touch, if you want to make yourself available for an interview, and you're a woman or a person of a different ethnic background than me, please get in touch, because we'd love to talk to you and give the truth about the North. What's going on. We're a political podcast. We're about politics, but how it impacts the North. You can't divorce that from business, economics, politics, culture.
No.
It's all wrapped up in the same thing. It's all about identity, but it's also ultimately about people. I always used to say that when I was a business journalist. Oh, God, isn't that a bit boring, writing about bloody balance sheets and facts and figures and economy and all that? I went, no, it's not. I write about people who are in business, and I love their stories. And what Chris and I have also said absolutely from the outset, and we're fairly ruthless about this, don't talk about something unless we can offer insight. Yeah. So that's why, when the Queen died, Chris told some really interesting stories about the time he worked on the Bristol Evening Post. And I said, what would it have been like? He'd been the editor of the Chorley and Leyland Guardian in Lancashire. I said, what would it be like putting together a local paper right now? How do you cover an international event like the death of a monarch and a head of state? Yeah. And it was fascinating. Yeah. And he told the story about when he was on the Bristol Evening Post, and Prince Charles, as he then was marrying Camilla, and the headline in the paper was Tetbury man to wed.
Yeah.
Like a cheeky sense of humour that, maybe it's, apart from in Tameside, it's probably been lost from a lot of local papers.
Well, I mean, obviously that's scrubbed off for his knighthood.
Michael, if you can send us a brief of what you need, we have a lot of contacts within right across Black and ethnic minority groups. I support a lot of them with fundraising and strategy anyway. So, and I'm also a trustee for We Stand Together.
Oh,
so if
fantastic.
you tell me what the brief is for your
I'll drop you a note
for your podcast, I'll send it out to them networks and just see if there's anybody. There's some amazing people. I mean, we've started tapping into that sort of network for the Great Mank Pod, because they all are amazing community activists, and that's basically that is our brief. Is if you're doing something great in Greater Manchester and you bring it, then we'll have you on. Do you know what I mean?
Listen, I mean, these Talking Heads podcasts have been around for forever and ever. I mean, we started it with the Man Made podcast.
Yeah.
Not we started the genre, obviously it was there, but everyone that we interviewed on that, which is a good few years, but all Jack Wood, who we had on to interview, has been interviewed numerous times since on every single Manchester-based podcast, asked the same questions, and no one's ever really got any further than that. And you probably more than me meet these people who are media trained to within an inch of the life. But when you start speaking to someone like Damien and I should imagine it'll be the same with yourself and Chris, after a few minutes, a kind of barrier slips and you get to see the person, sounds a bit melodramatic, but the person behind that.
Yeah.
And those stories are far, far more interesting than, I've got the biggest selling company, the biggest company in the Northwest, right? So, right, you've gone into business to make money, big deal. What you doing with that money? And there's a huge amount of people, again, you come across them just as much as I do, who are doing so much with the money that they've made out in the community. Some of them talk about it, fair enough, doesn't bother me as long as they're, doing what they're doing. But plenty don't and go under the radar. And you say to them, why aren't you telling people what you're doing? I'm not doing it for that. And they're genuinely not.
Yeah.
They're genuinely not. And it's pretty gobsmacking. And there's loads of people out there. But, in terms of who we have on here, it's always a difficult one. It's the same when you're putting anything together on a production. It's like, well, have we got enough? Do we need people from certain backgrounds or whatever? And my attitude has always been, if you try and level the playing field, sooner or later, you will end up with every single person that you can imagine that you would ever want to have on your podcast, as long as they get the same opportunities. And if you look at the number of people that we've spoken to, even on Great Mank Pod now, God, it's diverse. And that's not massively planned. It's just that you throw that net out there. And I'm sure it'll be the same with yours. I mean, I've listened to some of the episodes, and I'm not even lying when I say that. I have listened to some of the episodes and
of our podcast.
Yeah. Oh,
you went on holiday in Bahrain.
You do look, don't you? And you go, what? I mean, we was the pod play was number one in Azerbaijan at one point, number one all over the world. We were the Great Mank Pod. We were Hong Kong. We were in the top 10.
Great.
And then you think, you don't know in Hong Kong. And then you start getting paranoid, thinking, what do they know about me? Yeah. But listen, it's just a great medium for getting and having. It's nice to know you've got plans for it as well, because it takes time.
We are, and we're doing our first live event as well at the end of the month. There's an organisation called the People's Powerhouse, which was set up by Edna Robinson, who's a wonderful, wonderful woman.
Right.
And remember when the Northern Powerhouse was a thing about 10 years ago?
I do, yeah.
And they had this conference at, I'll always call it GMX.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not even pausing.
No.
They had a big conference. And I think over 2 days, there was like 2 non-white people and about 4 women on like a sea of white fellas talking about buildings and bridges and tunnels and railways. And a lot of women leaders in like Doncaster and Manchester and stuff just went, this isn't good enough. This isn't good enough. So actually the Northern Powerhouse cannot be top down, loads of blokes telling us what to do. Actually, we've got our own agenda and we're going to stand up for communities and people. And they've had some fantastic conventions that I've been to in Sunderland, Bradford, Doncaster. And the next one is in Manchester. So it's Manchester's turn on the 30th of November. And they've asked me to do a special recording of our podcast with guests. So hopefully we'll get people like Tracy Brabin or Nazir Afzal, the former chief prosecutor, to come in and have a chat to me and Chris at in a live setting.
So when's that? The 30th of November, and that's
at the Friends Meeting House just off Albert Square.
Oh, I might come to that.
No, you must come. You must come.
Any questions from the floor? Yes.
Yeah.
I have a question.
But I think the whole event will be interesting to you guys. You should come. It's really good.
It sounds great, mate. Listen,
People's Powerhouse. What a great concept, eh?
Yeah.
Reclaiming it from, the Tory powerhouse. And it is, to be fair, it's political with a small p. It's not party political. Even in the thick of the, the kind of whole giddy excitement around in 2017 and post-Brexit, it never made the mistake of going down that particular party route. It very sensibly stuck to how can communities organise themselves to take advantage of opportunities and look after each other, which ultimately is what it's all about, isn't it?
I said that last night, mate, in the post that was out. Do you know Lisa Morton?
Yeah.
But she put something out which had shared, and she's saying, we were speaking to someone yesterday about potentially looking at some kind of warm bank, some place that we're speaking to, and it's like, are we living in this? Are we really living in a place where we're speaking about a place where people go so they don't freeze to death? And that's not even really melodramatic. And he was talking about this new thing that she's starting with Andy, this where you can pay I think it's £1 on your meal, and it goes towards whatever, which is great. It's doing something. But the ironic thing about that was, so I responded, and then obviously because Andy's name mentioned, this guy obviously has a thing on. So every time Andy Burnham is mentioned, he pops on and he starts sprouting on about Andy and what he's doing and he's not doing. And I'm sat there this morning and reading it. And my initial response was just to tell him where to go. But I always say, even with people, I might have my issues with whoever, but my attitude is, well, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. Always.
What are you doing? Yeah, and there's far too much of that.
Yeah.
I sense there's a bit of tension between you two when you're talking. I like that. Like Damien and myself. There's a lot of tension. I mean, we normally decompress afterwards and just phone each other up and shout at each other for half an hour. But yeah, you should try that. It's a good technique. What's the name of the lad you do the show with?
Neil Summers.
Neil. Yeah, I don't know Neil. I know his Mrs. Rachel.
Yeah.
Used to work with Rachel in the dim and distant. She's lovely. It's a small world. It's a small big city, Manchester. Everyone knows everyone. And I know he's a great writer. Neil, ready stuff, and I know he's into his jackets.
Definitely, yeah.
Into his jacket. So when you two together, and I haven't listened. I've listened to bits of that show, but when you say the mental well-being comes into it, or mental health comes into it, how does that come into it, and why, as much as you want to talk about it?
Yeah. So the program goes out between 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock on Sunday night.
Right.
And our calculation was Sunday night can be a really dark place for a lot of people, thinking about work the next day, thinking about not going to work the next day. Think Sunday night just seems to be that time. So the purpose of our show is to play music that will take people away from whatever anxieties they've got, to just forget them for a couple of hours. But the chat that we do tends to be quite life-affirming. We always say to people at the end of every show, look after each other out there. And I play a song at 10 o'clock every week, the same song, but there are hundreds of versions of it, and it is called True Love Will Find You in the End. It was originally written by an American musician who's no longer with us, called Daniel Johnston.
Right.
It was a big mainstay of the music scene in Austin, Texas, which is where South by Southwest festival and conference is. And that song, with his really strained vocals, it's incredibly powerful. And lots of people have covered it and given their own interpretation to it. And I keep discovering more and more versions of it. So we always play that at 10 o'clock. And it's become like a mental health anthem. And a lot of Daniel's writings and his artwork as well around, it's a frog motif, is used as the kind of the emblem about Mental Health Awareness Day, or whatever it is they call it in America, particularly in college campuses, and providing that wraparound really to look after people. and open up and talk. It's be comfortable, and lean in and look for help if you need it. And don't be sad.
Is it pre-recorded, the show? Is it live?
Yeah, we pre-record it.
Oh, right. I was going to say, do you get people getting in touch, and do you get a response afterwards from people, whether it be, and I wouldn't expect you to tell me anything untoward, but I mean, DMs, like, because listen, I don't care who you are. It's amazing when someone gets in touch and said, you know what?
Yeah.
That meant a lot.
Somebody has literally said to us, your show kept me going through lockdown.
Wow.
I mean, for that reason and that reason alone, we carry on doing it. Yeah, because if it means that much to one person that they do that, fine. And as long as Andy Hoyle thinks that we're doing something a little bit different on the dial, that brings something to their schedule, I get to write about in the paper, and that we talk about jackets and foreign trips and.
How do you deal with your mental health? What's your kind of outlet?
Music, the outdoors. I'm very blessed to be in a family where we love each other, and I know that's not true of a lot of people, but I'm incredibly blessed to be in a very happy relationship that I am. Very grateful. I thank every day. The other thing is, I go to church, right? My faith comes and goes, but the one constant is, whether I believe in an afterlife or a divine presence, it's not a lot to take 1 hour every week to just sit there and give thanks and praise for how lucky we are, to be grateful for what we have, to be friends, for our friends, for the health of our families, the ability to deal with the challenges that life throws at us. And just to think about the enormity of it and not to be judgmental. And those 10 commandments that we might see and the prayers that we might say. If ultimately I go out of there and I'm a little better as a person, then what's the harm in it? What's the harm in it? That's my kind of approach to it. And so I've got that 1 hour every week where we contemplate. And I haven't got any hard and fast solutions in it.
I mean, I'm very spiritual but in different ways. And people forget to say thank you and to, whether it's, I mean, I'm pagan, but I'm also a Christian, but just to give thanks for those fantastic things in life. People think that religion is just about saying prayers to ask for shit. Do you know what I mean? And it doesn't work that way. It is about taking stock of what's good, so I'm glad you brought that up, Michael. It helps me. And I hear from you that it helps you as well.
Yeah, it does. The other thing is the outdoors. So about 8 years ago, I was involved in a networking organization, which was, a lot of what we did was great work. And I put together an idea to do something called netwalking. To go out onto the hills. And I got together with Tom Hetherington, who you might know, who's a big foodie, lives in Glossop, runs Holden Media and the Northern Restaurant and Bar Show. And this incredible mate of mine called Michael De Paula, who works in an agency.
The legend, Sam Jones is a good mate of mine.
Yeah.
And I've spoke to him a few times. I said, I'm going to have to come on one of those walks. Yeah, never have done. But yeah, he seems like a bit of a force of nature, does Michael?
Yeah, so we said, let's go in the hills. And we did this networking. And then eventually DP spun it off as his own business. And it became Fresh Walks. And he's incredibly generous in saying it was my idea. It wasn't. Fresh Walks, the name, the brand, the concept, everything that he's built up from it. It started him and his drive and energy. I just thought it'd be a nice idea to go for a walk. And if that encouraged him to go off and eventually do that, that's brilliant. As it currently stands on the leaderboard of kilometres walked in 2022, I'm 11th, and I'm not happy about that. So I need to get some more walks in between now and the end of the year.
How many kilometres is that?
I'm on about 250.
Right.
Might be less. I need to check. But last year, I think I won. I think I was ahead by a long way. because I was practically unemployed last year.
Right.
So I went on everything. But this time around, no. I think I've slipped behind. But last year, I think I won. But there was no award given. Maybe because it was lockdown or whatever.
Well, I'm annoyed for you now.
It's all right. But to be fair, what was absolutely lovely, so I was pretty much out of work last year. And then, so you don't get a Christmas do when you're unemployed or self-employed.
No.
So I went to the Fresh Walks Christmas party and they had a special award for community champion. And they give it to me.
Well,
and it's right up there on me in my little office in my house. And I won loads of awards for journalism back in the day. And I enjoyed winning them all because I have got a competitive streak. But the 2 awards I've enjoyed winning more than any were the Insider Pub Quiz one and in my last year there, which I kept permanently.
Journalists in pubs? No.
Pub Quiz. And the Fresh Walks Community Champion Award, which, it's about helping people out. And I get an enormous amount of satisfaction from helping other people.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I know you guys clearly do. You've devoted your lives to it through your incredible charity work. But, just like people who want a bit of help with a connection, if I could monetize that'd be ace. But not just journalism.
Yeah.
The thing I ought to mention, you were trying to take the piss out of me about journalists and pubs. I've been 10 years sober.
Not at all. Not at all.
I've not drunk alcohol now for knocking on 11 years. And I've not missed it a single day.
Yeah.
Not a single day.
I'm 2 years. Just coming up to 2 years.
Good for you. Yeah. And I go to the gym. I go to the gym every morning. 5 o'clock, I set the alarm. I know that sounds a little bit LinkedIn. But it means I get a lot more done.
Yeah.
And some days I don't feel I've done a great deal. Other days I'm like absolutely rocking it. But again, health and fitness, I never regret going to the gym. I always enjoy it. Get something out of it. Just feel like I've loosened, got clarity, plan my day ahead. Yeah.
I try and get it's certainly during lockdown started. I mean, I've always walked a fair bit, but I try and get out and walk every day. And but yeah, I mean, knocking the booze on, probably the best. I mean, I wasn't getting to the point where I was, waking up. I always knew where I woke up, but it's, I'm near the end and the beginning, and I'm trying to get so much stuff done at the moment, creatively and everywhere else, that it's amazing how much energy, forget the money and all the other benefits, but how much energy you get by not boozing and the other things like, anxiety and all that type of stuff. But it's, and you're coming across, and I'm not an evangelist on that front at all. I did it because I wanted to do it. I don't care what anyone else does. But there's so many people, certainly younger people, who seem to not be drinking, and some of them are doing other stuff, unfortunately. But it seems to be more people who are kind of switching onto that kind of,
why not?
Yeah, the alcohol side of things. So this isn't actually an intervention for you, Damien.
I was just about to rage quit then, Paul.
Rage quit.
So what if you don't mind me asking, what was the? Did you just want mine was lifestyle, just a lifestyle change.
I sometimes say rather flippantly, it was a bit like golf. I was never very good at it. So I packed it in. That's
a good answer. Yeah.
I really genuinely wasn't. And I think back to all the times when I've made a right tit of myself.
Yeah.
Always involved alcohol.
I just thought it was coincidence with me. Dropped drinking Stella years and years ago, because I thought, no, that it's definitely Stella. And then you think, no, it's not. It wasn't Stella. it was anything. Listen, I've had some of the most creative ideas I've ever had when I've been sat in the Wetherspoons. Well, I won't even mention them. I'll cut that bit out. When I've been sat in a pub, and it's very social what I do. And so I was always out and about, but I've also made some of the stupidest mistakes I've ever made when I've had a few beers. But yeah, such is life. But it's nice to know that. I mean, you said, listen, we've only met fleetingly when we were doing the charity, and I think there was a few emails that caught him. Damien and I always said, and listen, I'm sure you've said it, you just said this 1,000 times, far too old to blow smoke up people's arse. You've always struck me as a decent bloke and someone that I think that we could do an awful lot more with. Bearing in mind the people that we know between us, and we'll definitely take you up on sitting down and see what we can do with Quest.
Well, next year is going to bring new things, which I'm getting excited about.
Right.
But, let's get this one out of the way first. But should be another new chapter in life's interesting journey next year.
You're not going to go on I'm a Celebrity, are you?
No, definitely not. No.
Lee said the better. Listen, lovely to speak to you, mate. Thanks for your time.
Not at all, guys.
Really appreciate it.
Hopefully the signal managed to maintain itself.
It did, yes.
Switching the camera off.
It's a funny old world, mate. It's a funny old world. Some people just don't want us talking. I won't tell you who they are. I'll send you a DM. But I bet you can guess. All right. Listen, have a great day, mate. Speak to you soon.
Cheers, thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Michael.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to That Great Mank Pod. Please do us a massive favour and subscribe to this podcast. And if you can, leave us a review on iTunes. Both are a massive help, enabling us to promote the people and the great causes we champion to a much bigger audience. If you want to get in touch, give us a follow on Twitter at Great Mank Pod and drop us a DM. Cheers.
You're listening to That Great Mank Pod, Greater Manchester's community podcast. Top one, argue.